Hello, in today's video we're going to discuss the most useful E.G.O passives in Limbus Company. My goal with this video isn't to drop some kind of hot take or create a controversial list. I think most of the passives on this list will come as no surprise to the people who are familiar with them. Instead, my goal is to remind people of the tools they have in the toolbox and what they can do with E.G.O passives that they might not know about or not have heard about before, since it's a pretty under-discussed aspect of the game. First, we'll go over my top 5 most useful E.G.O passives, and then we'll look at another 16 highly useful E.G.O passives. Alright, let's get right into it. The first one is Contempt Awe Ryoshu with Mark of the Gaze. Whenever this unit uses a base attack skill against an enemy, gain 1 additional E.G.O resource for a random, least owned affinity that doesn't correspond to the affinity of the attack skill used. This E.G.O is crazy. I mean, it's worth using Superbia on early. It balances out teams with poor affinity distribution. I'm looking at you, Burn. Burn teams are notorious for that. And it has staggered sanity loss, so you won't corrode, as easily at least. This is because you pay some sanity up front, and then you pay the other half of the sanity over the next 2 turns. And this gives you an opportunity to win clashes. It means your percentage chance of corroding is lower in the first place. It gives you a chance to pop off some sanity healing E.G.O. Overall, it's just an amazing passive. And since the introduction of Superbia has gotten even better. All right, let's look at the next one. Thorakalgia Ryoshu. Apologies if I mispronounced that. Her passive is Breath, and it simply gives Nebulizer. And Nebulizer, for those unfamiliar, is crazy. I mean, on Pride Resonance, you get Poise. And you don't just get Poise, you get Poise Count and Potency. The E.G.O also gives you better critical hits. That's not pictured in the passive, but, you know, Poise is crits, better crits is better Poise. It's crazy. And that's literally it, and it's amazing. This E.G.O is going to be relevant probably for the rest of the game because it's Nebulizer outside of Mero Dungeon. Absolutely crazy. Great E.G.O. Okay, next up we have Ebony Stem Outis. At the start of the turn, gain 1 pierce damage up. On hit with a heads coin, inflict 1 bind and 1 rupture count next turn. This is rupture count application. I mean, rupture is a team that is count negative, and this is basically guaranteeing Otis an extra rupture count on all of her skills, right? She uses a skill 2. Well, now instead of being rupture neutral, maybe it's going rupture positive. You know, she uses, maybe if you're using 7 association Otis, which has a -3 count skill 3, well, now it's going to apply another count. So it's only -2 now. I mean, this really adds up, and free rupture count application is pretty crazy, even if it's limited. The bind is also cool, and the pierce damage, you know, it's nice if you're using like magic bullet Otis or something. But that's not the crazy part of this E.G.O. It's really that free automatic rupture count application. Next up, we have Dimension Shredder Yisong, who pairs very nicely with Ebony Stem Outis. His passive is Rambling Man, which gives him charge if he didn't take damage last turn, but much more importantly, when he hits an enemy with lower speed, he inflicts +1 rupture count up to 3 times per turn. This is the rupture count blessing that every identity wishes they had. And now sometimes you might be worried about, with a particularly fast enemy, like some of the enemies in Refraction Railway, if you're going to be able to get this passive off. But again, that's where Ebony Stem Outis comes in, who's inflicting bind. See how this starts to play together really nicely on a rupture team? And this makes skills on, let's say, Lantern Yisong or W Corp Yisong start looking very count positive, or at least count neutral. Even if he can't hit, like on Lantern Yisong, the 15-3 conditional, so he's not applying count. Anyway, just an incredible passive. Oh, yeah, I forgot to transition to this slide. Yep. Same turn rupture count, nice bit of charge, and it pairs well with the bind from Ebony Stem Outis. Just a perfect passive. Alright, next up we have Regret Merceau. This unit's leftmost skill loses 1 base power and gains 2 coin power. I mean, this is the E.G.O passive to end all E.G.O passives. This will probably be the single best E.G.O passive ever in the game. I don't think we're ever going to get anything better than this. It breathes life into Merceau's weak IDs, and Oh, on his strong IDs, it's crazy. Bamboo-headed Kim rolling an extra 6 coin power on acupuncture. Like, hello? It even helps Kim lose clashes better with Yield My Flesh because it starts going to -14 instead of -12. Or, right, no, yeah, -10 instead of -8, sorry. And, you know, the blunt power up if he's at 4 or lower speed. I mean, it's whatever. But Regret Merceau, absolutely insane ego passive. Will probably never be topped. Okay, so those are my top 5. Got through those in about a minute on each of them. Now let's look at just some other highly useful ego passives. I do have to say I had initially planned for this video to be 2 videos, one with this stuff and one with honorable mentions, but I got overexcited and I accidentally put the honorable mentions in the content for this video. So there is a bit of variability with the strength, but all 16 of these featured are they're pretty good. All right, let's get right into it. So for Yisong, we have Bygone Days, Wishing Cairn, and Sun Shower. Bygone Days gives you Clash power up when they have 6 potency sinking or 4 count for potency. This means he can get up to 2 Clash power up from Bygone Days. Obviously, this is a sinking ego, so you're going to use him on a sinking team. Two Clash power up for pretty low investments, pretty nice. It's hard to resist 2 Clash power up. I mean, on some of these endgame enemies that are rolling pretty darn high, it's legit. Next, there's Wishing Cairn. At the start of the turn, gain 3 blunt and 3 sloth protection every turn. If you're a new player, it's a little bit spoilers, but Canto 7, there's a particularly infamous boss who opens up dealing like 6 attacks that are all blunt sloth. Well, there you go. They're on Wishing Cairn, and now Yisong is taking 60% less damage. With his Fairy Lantern ego out, this ego is going to start getting more, or sorry, not Fairy Lantern ego, Fairy Lantern ID out. Wishing Cairn is going to start seeing more use, I think, because now we have a kind of a Yisong ID, half designed to tank, half designed to bait. You can throw in Wishing Cairn and, you know, maybe if you don't want him to die and give you ego resources and you want him to stick around longer, now you have Wishing Cairn. And it's just good on any Yisong ID. I mean, if you know the enemy's using blunt, this is absolutely crazy. Lastly, there's Sun Shower. At the start of the turn, all allies heal 3 SP. I like this because when I use Sun Shower and I roll tails and it feels really bad, I remind myself that Sun Shower has a very healing passive. It just feels nice to know that all my friends are going to heal 3 SP every turn, and I feel a little bit less bad about rolling tails. But no, I mean, this can add up over the course of a chain battle, and if we ever run into another sinking boss again, it's kind of nice. It's a nice little passive. Next up, there's Faust. We have Hexnail, Fluid Sac, and Telephone Pole. Hexnail's passive is a passive I think a lot of people have been sleeping on. Hexnail is Teth. It doesn't compete with Fluid Sac, and its passive 10% more damage for every negative effect on the self with a 50% cap. Now that Ardor Blossom Moth Faust is out, who literally stacks negative effect on herself to do more damage, you pair Hexnail with that. Well, now she's doing 10% more damage because of that burn. Throw in the fact that Unbreakable Coin is in the game now, and you're going to start taking unavoidable bleed, probably in Canto 8, unavoidable rupture, and there's that lasso boss that does unavoidable rupture. Now you start having a Faust who has burn on herself, who has bleed on herself, who has rupture on herself. I think Hexnail is going to start getting some more use going into Canto 8. Now that Unbreakable Coin is here to stay, and now that we have Ardor Blossom off Faust. Fluid Sac, I don't really have a lot to say. 2 protection to the ally with the least HP, including Stealth. Just very helpful. Protects your weakest member. Telepole. Now, Telepole competes with Fluid Sac, so this ego is pretty hated by the community. But 2% more damage per charge count? Like, Multicrack Faust can do insane damage already. You get Multicrack Faust to 20 charge count, which is not hard to do at all, especially if you have Telepole equipped, and suddenly your Faust is doing 40% more damage. If you're running like Rhodia or Morceau, Holiday Otis, I mean Bygone Days Ishmael, if you have healing ego you can throw in and you can take Fluid Sac out of your roster, you should look at Telepole because this is some crazy damage. Alright, next up we have Don Quixote. Don Quixote has 2 ego passives that are pretty good. There's Yearning Mercala. Every time 10 bleed damage occurs, heal 1 SP on self. I mean, this is nice. It's nice. It's hard to resist free, unconditional SP healing. And let's be real, Yearning Mercala is so good already. You're probably just going to use this ego because you want to. And then you'll get a really nice SP healing passive. For La Sangre de Sancho, this ego on hit, if the target has bleed, heal 3 HP, it's fallen off just because HP pools have gotten higher. When this released, at the launch of the game, you could only go up to level 30. Now that we can go up to level 50, IDs just have more health, and so 3 HP healing isn't as impactful. But, I mean, this ego it's been legit for a while. I mean, Don Quixote, the healing adds up. Especially if, runs go wrong, your person with healing ego dies, you need self-sustain. It's a good passive. Alright, next we have Ryoshu with a whopping 4 really strong ego passives. There's Red Eyes Open. If this unit healed more than 10% of its max HP this turn, gain 1 attack power up next turn. It's good. I mean, Serious Skullbuster from Reap Ryoshu, Red Eyes and Penitence Ryoshu will hit this conditional, and so that way on the turn where you have Ashes and you can't gain charge with Reap Ryoshu, well, at least you'll get 1 attack power up to help tide you over while you wait to start building up charge again. And then it's also just good, like maybe Pursuance heals you, maybe Fluid Sac heals you, and you just get a free attack power up. It's hard to argue with. Red Eyes is closed on Clash Win, inflict 1 bind next turn, 3 times per turn. This is one of the classic, really strong ego passives. It's just free bind, and there's really not else to say. Free bind is great. Blind Obsession. Now this ego has fallen off a lot because Thoracalgia exists and Ryoshu can just get Nebulizer. But if you don't have that ego, or you don't want to run it and you want to run something else in the Hess slot, Blind Obsession is only a Teth. And so you can use this passive on crit with Pride Affinity skill, gain 1 poise count 3 times per turn. And it effectively neutralizes some of the Pride consumption from Maid Ryoshu's skill 2. So it's fallen off, but it had its place, and it'll still continue to have its place because it doesn't compete for the Hess slot. Lastly, we have 4th Match Flame. Every 4th skill used gains +4 attack power, final power, and inflicts 4 burn with each attack. I mean, it's some damage and it's some burn. It keeps Liu Ryoshu in the game. Just a legit passive, but really nothing too crazy. It's not what I would call like a top passive or anything. For Mero, he has 2 pretty darn good ego passives. He has Pursuance. After winning a clash with the leftmost skill on the dashboard, apply 1 attack power up or defense power up to a random ally next turn. This passive's not great because you don't want defense power up, you really want the attack power up, but it's random. But the nice part is you're going to use Pursuance anyways, just because it's a really good healing ego. And so getting some free attack power up at a 50% rate out of an already good ego, yeah, I mean, this is a legit passive. It's something to just keep in mind. And then we have Screw Loose Wallop. If used at less than 25% HP, gain 3 attack power up, 3 defense power up, and haste every turn, but then die in 3 turns. Yeah, this is left over from the honorable mention video that accidentally ended up in this slideshow. It's not a good passive, but I think people just forget it exists. I mean, this is only in the Teth slot, so it only competes with, Regret. But hey, if you want to use Fervent Beats Mero, the option exists in the game, and nothing can stop you from pretending to be Roland from Library of Runa. Alright, Hangu ego passives. Land of Illusion. This one's actually pretty underrated, I think. Let's look at it. At the start of the combat phase, heal SP by the count of your highest absolute resonance value, excluding those in panic. So, I mean, highest absolute resonance value, this is going to be 3 to 6. Obviously, 6 absolute resonance is hard to get. 3 is pretty easy. But, going into Kanto 8, it's very possible Hangu starts getting his sanity removed, like a lot of the other sinners have gotten from their Kanto-specific buffs. But also just in general, it helps you get your sanity back after using expensive ego. Now, Hangu doesn't really have this problem because he doesn't have a vow E.G.O yet, but once he gets his in season 6, suddenly finding ways to get sanity back, just like for everyone else who has a high sanity cost E.G.O, is going to start being relevant. So I think we're going to see Land of Illusion start being something that players can consider. Oh yeah, I already want to do Pride Resonance. Well, now I can get Hangu an extra 5 sanity if I do this Pride Resonance. And Pride's just an option. I mean, you can do it with any skill. Dimension Shredder, when hitting an enemy with negative status effects, this unit gains +1 charge, max 4 per turn. When HP falls to 0 for the first time, spend all charge count and heal in proportion to the amount spent, 25% max. I mean, it's legit. There's very few E.G.O in the game that prevents death, or just effects in general. Like Kim can resist death once. I'm really scratching my head. Merceau Kim can resist death. I'd have to look more into it. But the point is this is a rare effect, and it lets you, it lets you take some risks, and it lets you get away from bad situations unpunished. Obviously, there's very little reason to use W-Core Hangu, but since he gains charge when he hits people who have negative effects, which, I mean, that's most teams. You're going to run a rupture team, a burn team, a sinking team, a tremor team. It's just a nice way for him to get charged without even being on a charge team and then revive himself. All right, Heathcliff. Heathcliff has some crazy E.G.O passives. AEDD is a real icon. When hit, spend 1 charge count to heal 2.5% of max HP. At less than 40% HP, gain 1 charge count before activating the healing effect, max 10 per turn. This is great because Heathcliff has a lot of IDs that synergize with this. Pequod Heathcliff wants to get hit and go to low HP. This keeps him alive. Sunshower Heathcliff wants to get hit to activate his self-sinking so he can lose sanity, and this helps keep him alive. You got Multicrack Heathcliff who just wants charge anyways, and Multicrack Heathcliff sometimes can't clash all that great, but now he has this to help keep him alive. And then there's also She Association Heathcliff, right? Maybe he takes a bad hit because you had to get him staggered, and this could help him. Now, of course, if you're running She Association Heathcliff, you have bigger problems. But the point I'm trying to make is that AEDD is surprisingly legitimate on Heathcliff. Same with My Form Empties. Everything I just said about AEDD applies to My Form Empties. It raises his max HP when he's staggered. And so the more he gets hit with his tanky IDs, well, now he has My Form Empties to help keep him alive. And it can be pretty significant. The last thing to note is Asymmetrical Inertia Heathcliff, which inflicts fragile this turn on enemies who are hit by Tremor Burst. That's 10% more damage. You're Tremor Bursting for damage, and now you're doing 10% more. It's hard to argue with free 10% extra damage. Except we're not done with Heathcliff because he's actually cracked. Kingbinds at combat start at 4+ highest resonance that includes this unit's skills, aka at 4+ gloom resonance. Apply 3 offense level up and 3 defense level up. If it was absolute resonance, apply 2 extra to self and all allies. I mean, we're talking on just a 4 gloom resonance, which is hard to do, but depending on the team you're running, very legitimate. You get 5 offense level up and defense level up for the turn. I mean, that's 15% more damage on all your sinners. And you're already getting Gloom Resonance, which is going to give you more offense level up and give you more damage. You stack this up on top, and suddenly you've got a turn where you're just nuking them. Just a phenomenal passive. For Ishmael, we have Snag Harpoon and Christmas Nightmare. Snag Harpoon's a classic. It's her default E.G.O. Clash power +2, -2 in favorable or struggling clashes. Obviously +2 in favorable, -2 in struggling. Generally, you only want to take favorable clashes anyways, and this helps get you out of that danger zone of just being favored and into that nice zone of being dominating. We've all had those painful moments where you lose a clash by 1. Well, Snag Harpoon says, no, I'm not going to lose by 1. I'm going to get +2. Just a great E.G.O. Christmas Nightmare, all allies gain +1 tremor count from skills or coin effects 2 times per turn. If allies target was staggered, low morale, or panic state, gain +2 more instead. Very strong. I mean, Detective Hangu, the biggest thing that holds him back is he can't get enough tremor count on himself. Christmas Nightmare Ishmael comes in, he starts getting more tremor count. Same goes for T-Corp Don Quixote. She really wants a lot of tremor count on herself fast. Well, now you have Ishmael here boosting her up. And Ishmael has good tremor identities, right? Ishmael has Y and she has Molar. So just really great ego. For Rodion, we have Rhyme Shank, Pursuance, and Sanguine Desire. Rhyme Shank, on hit if the target has 5+ sinking, inflict 1 bind and 1 attack power down, 3 times per unit. In the age of Unbreakable Coin, this is getting better, right? Because normally you want to inflict attack power down next turn, like what Merceau's Chains of Others does. But with Unbreakable Coin, suddenly it's a lot more value to hit someone with an attack that inflicts attack power down, and then when they hit you back with their Unbreakable Coin, now you're taking less damage. So Rhyme Shank is actually, strangely, it's getting more relevant again, which is crazy because it's already super good. For Pursuance, it just gives free Lithogram. Whenever an enemy is staggered, the ally with the least HP heals 4% of their max HP once per turn. This is really more of an honorable mention. The once per turn holds it back. If it wasn't once per turn, this would be awesome. But as it is, in the chain battles and the longer form content we're getting, it can be kind of nice. Lastly, Sanguine Desire. This unit's leftmost skill on the dashboard inflicts double the bleed potency. It's good. I mean, more bleed potency means you ramp up stuff like Blood Feast faster. It's a little more damage. It's just hard to argue with double the bleed potency once per turn. All right, Sinclair Ego Passive. Note I said passive, not passives, because Sinclair unfortunately has pretty bad ego passives. He doesn't have that many ego in general. He still doesn't have a vow ego. He really just needs more. But he does have Impending Day, which does, after defeating an enemy with an attack or counter skill, gain 5 ego resources of that skill's affinity. Now, if this passive was like +3 ego resources or +2, I probably wouldn't have even put it on the list. But 5 is crazy, especially when you think about like slotting Sinclair in on a team where maybe you have a Sin Affinity imbalance and now you throw a Sinclair ID in that generates the Sin Affinity you need most. Now he can get 5 ego resources after defeating someone with that. I mean, even if you only get this passive to proc once, which is not that hard to do. I mean, a lot of bosses have little trash mobs that they summon or obstacles you have to break. And if you can get even 1 kill with Sinclair after using this, I mean, you could get 6 Gloom on a team that's starved for Gloom. That's insane value. Or you could get 6 Sloth on a team that's starved for Sloth. It's insane value. Just a great ego passive. All right, Otis ego passive. She has 2 that stand out. Magic Bullet, inflict more burn the more magic bullet you have. This effect is even better on LobCorp Otis, and LobCorp Otis also gets to inflict more Dark Flame. Don't have a lot to say about this. More burn, more bullet, more flame. All things you want to hear. Just a great passive. Really kind of revitalizes Magic Bullet Otis identity. And then Otis also has Dimension Shredder. This is more honorable mention tier because, as you can see, it does more damage for every charge count, but it only maxes out at 10%. Womp womp womp. I don't know why Project Moon set that so low. It's kind of ridiculous, to be honest. 10% it should be 20% or 30%. Especially because W Corp Otis doesn't do that much damage. But this Ego, Dimension Shredder, and its passive are basically mandatory to make W Corp Otis good. So that's why I ended up on the list, because it keeps W Corp Otis, it keeps her head in the game. And lastly, we have Gregor. Gregor, also like Sinclair, only has 1 really good ego passive, but it is a whopper. Solemn Lament. At turn end, if this unit has a negative effect, gain 1 attack power up next turn. When attacking targets that are either in panic or ego corrosion, deal 15% more damage. Free attack power up on negative effect is crazy, because you have Unbreakable Coin on enemies, so it's getting really hard to avoid stuff like bleed and rupture and burn or whatever else the enemy wants to apply because of Unbreakable Coin. And Gregor also has a lot of identities that debuff himself, like Linton, like Priest. So Solemn Lament, super legit. And Gregor also has tank identities like Swy Gregor, and so you might just take an enemy hit to the face with a guard skill because you're taking 1 for the team, Well, now Solemn Lament's passive's online, and you get 1 attack power up as a treat. Regarding the extra attack damage, yeah, I mean, on a sinking team, it's just going to end up with 15% more damage against humans, which is legit. Can't argue with that. So some concluding thoughts. There are 88 E.G.O in Limbus Company currently, and every one of them has a passive, and I think that's something really to respect from Project Moon. They've put a ton of work into this game. Superbia and Unbreakable Coin makes E.G.O passives more relevant is just an unavoidable fact. I think going into Season 8, E.G.O passives will really start becoming an important part of gameplay for people who are locked in and kind of paying attention, just because some of those E.G.Os that we looked back on in the past and we're like, why would anyone use Hexnail Faust? I mean, my Faust is never going to get a negative effect put on her. Well, now we know that indeed negative effects are coming our way and there's nothing we can do about it. And with Superbia, it lets you get some of these amazing E.G.Os off turn 1. And not only does that mean you get the E.G.O off, which is what people want, but you're getting that passive online immediately. And for some of these, Contempt Au Ryoshu being the biggest example, that's a super high value return for the rest of the fight. And then the last thing I wanted to note is that Project Moon puts a ton of work into drawing all these abnormality backgrounds. I was super impressed as I put together these slides, how every single abnormality or E.G.O has a unique background, and it's just a crazy amount of artwork, and it really made me respect the game's development a lot more as I put this video together. Anyway, if you made it to the end, I hope you learned something from this video, and good luck out there, manager.